And now, Move the Sticks with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks.
What's up, everyone? I am Bucky Brooks, and this is Move the Sticks, and I'm joined by my guy, Lance Zierlein, the man who does everything for the website as it related to providing all the profiles, breaking it all down. How many profiles did we knock out this year, Lance?
We only got to like 445. My editor said he said, don't write guys that can't get drafted. I don't want to have to edit them. I said, I don't want to have to write them. So bet. I mean, we're on the same page.
I mean, you got to love that. I appreciate all the work because that is, man, laborious when it comes to like 400 and something profiles. That's crazy.
Know what's tough? I'm going to tell you the sneaky tough part is I'm watching tape in late October for some of these prospects and then early November. And there's two things that are really tough. I'm going to start with the easiest one, where you think you have a player based on tape, you know, his speed or this or that or length or whatever. And then you get the measurements or you get and now we're having to wait till pro day for some of these guys to run. Xavier Restrepo ran a 4.840. I got to go back and change part of my scouting report to reference his speed. Like you have to put that in there. And truth be told, Bucky, he probably doesn't get drafted with a 4.840. That's not to say he can't make a team, but it's real hard for teams to, you know, get on board with drafting a shorter slot receiver with a 4.840 is all he has to his name. And so going back and you know, re-looking at and retouching up some of the scouting report, some of the strengths and weaknesses I wrote up after pro day is one thing, but I'll tell you what else is tough. I wrote Josh Simmons and he was out for the year. So I wrote him in late November, early December. And I run him up, man, this guy's athletic. I like him. I'm going to give him a 62. That means kind of an average starter grade, kind of a 2, basically. And then you finish up the whole class. By the time I'm done with the whole class and you go back and watch Josh Simmons and you get your bearings under you about what it all looks like and you get recentered. I went and watched him the other day. I'm like, man, this guy is easily a high 64. Like he's easily the most he's the most talented tackle in the draft. Easily the most talented tackle. But it's different when you watch a guy, you know, in November before you've really got a good feel of the whole class. And remember, I'm hitting start again basically in October, November. I don't really look in June or July like I used to because I just found that it kind of was a waste of time. I get an idea, but I don't want to cloud my process with bias. And, you know, just looking back at some of these guys that like Josh Simmons, that guy should be a top 6 pick realistically, but he's not going to be. You know, Walter Nolen's got some maturity issues. That guy's a top 10 pick realistically.
Okay. So you took me to where I wanted to go. It's time for the winning combination brought to you by Lowe's. And Lance, I kind of wanted to have that conversation because what I like to do to kind of keep myself honest is like I read a lot of the stuff that is on the internet, and someone had recently posted kind of like a composite of like they talked to a bunch of different scouts and coaches about the guys and the names that, you know, they made a top 100. And so I always kind of like to look at my list compared to somebody else's list to see if did I have any egregious errors? Am I missing somebody? And on this list, they had Walter Nolen at 6. And at the end of last week, I brought Walter Nolen up on Path to the Draft because I kind of dug into his background. And excuse me for not knowing this, but he was the number 1 recruit in the class when he came out. Yep. Like the same class as Travis Hunter. Walter Nolen was number 1. So then I was like, well, wait a minute. Like I saw the talent. I looked at my notes. I liked what I wrote. I had him in my like top 15. But I'm like, let me go back and look at Texas A&M. And you're like, oh, whoa, Walter Nolen kind of got that get down. And then you go and you look at him play at Ole Miss and you see first step quickness, hand usage. You see the penetration. You see him flash dominance where he has some take over the game ability. And unfortunately, I would say for us in the TV world, man, sometimes we get roped into having the same conversations about the same guys. And we neglect guys that should have more conversation. And my goal this week on Path was, hey, man, we need to have this conversation about Walter Nolen being a legitimate guy, where everyone is kind of penciled in Mason Graham as like, oh, Jackson Miller 6, Jackson Miller 5, Mason Graham first D tackle, boom. Walter Nolen's going to go a lot higher than people think.
Here's the thing. I've got him regardless of, there's like people I talked to at A&M said high maintenance, got some high maintenance stuff to him. And look, I've been told he is going to fall. Realistically, he's ahead of Colston Loveland. I've got him 5th in this class. If you just turn on the tape and watch tape, you can't go in any other direction other than Walter Nolen is the top defensive tackle in the draft. You really can't. I like Mason Graham. He plays hard, but I think that he's, kind of a standard hard play defensive tackle, got some shorter arms, can't really long limb his way around guys as a rusher. Walter Nolen is explosive on all 3 downs. Walter Nolen is a guy that can disrupt on first, second, or third down. He's long, he's quick, he's very physical and aggressive. If we just work off the tape, you're right. He does deserve a lot more conversation. I think some of it is driven by the fact that he may not be a top, a top 10, top 15 pick, even though his play warrants it. But we had this conversation with Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter, we had plenty of conversation about Jalen Carter, and he ended up going 10th. Like Walter Nolen, you're right. We haven't, truth be told, Walter Nolen, James Pierce,
yep.
And Will Johnson, because he never ran, so there's going to be a question about his speed. And I'm missing one more, but there's and Josh Simmons. Man, these guys right here, you could be looking at. I don't know what's going to happen with Will Johnson, but the other 3, there's maturity issues, some character concerns, whatever the case may be. Realistically, those are top. We're talking about top 6, 8, 12. And so I ask you this, Bucky, let me flip it on you. When, as a team, do you say, are you comfortable enough with my room is strong enough, even if this guy's mature or whatever? Like everyone has a different standard or a different breaking point, but I'm really curious when somebody says, man, I'm drafting a talent and we will work on getting a good mentor with this guy. We're going to get a plan for him, because those 3 guys I just mentioned, and Will Johnson is a speed thing, so that's a little different. That's real first round high end talent that may slip to the back half of the first round, which is crazy to me.
Okay, so here's the thing, and here's the challenge on our side, right? So a lot of times we're tasked with lists, and I just realized I got to do a mock draft today, so I got to flow through that pretty quickly and get that done. But Lance, is one of the things that I'm always pretty resolute that I want to be able to look back at my list in 3 or 4 years and be able to own whatever I put out there in terms of top 5s, how I got them ranked or whatever, and ignore, because it's easy on our side to get caught up in, well, I want the list to reflect what the draft looks like in terms of when guys come off the board and those things. But that's not the way that it should be done. The way that all of this should be done is in 3 years, how do we expect this guy to impact the league? Because that's the line of demarcation. When we grade into the guy is our expectation for how the player is going to play by the end of his 3rd season in the league. And those guys that you believe are going to be stars, like a Jalen Carter. We always sit here and talk about, man, Jalen Carter should be the first player in the draft. All the other stuff clouded us. And so what has happened for Jalen Carter since he's shown up at Philadelphia? He looks like the best defensive tackle in ball.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the grade should have been. It's not really our job to ding people for the character stuff.
Right.
That's the team's job. Our job is to talk about, well, look, he may fall because of his character, but this is the player. The player is this. And everyone has a different level of tolerance for character issues and those things. But as you talked about, the guys that you named, Nolen, Pierce, Simmons, Johnson, all are excellent players. All are worthy of being top 12 players based on what they put on tape. Now, the other stuff, someone else can unpack that. But the talent is certainly there. And I feel like for some of the guys, man, look, James Pierce has become almost like a bad word on TV, even though on our side, we don't have anything to document why he's fallen.
Right. Yeah. And I keep my grades separate from the character stuff. Now, I will change round projections because that's supposed to be where I think they'll
Yeah.
go based on league intel. But I mean, I've got James Pierce as a 64, which is a true first round player. I've got Simmons. I was just kind of late. Like I said, I wrote him too early. Frankly, his grade should be higher, but I'm not going to change it. But I got him at a borderline first. But I mean, frankly, it should, my grade should probably be a 6.48, which would put him in the neighborhood, maybe even higher, a 65, which is a
Mhm.
boom bust number because of, some character or whatever.
Yeah.
But I've got Walter Nolen up there. I've got James Pierce. Like, I typically don't mess with that stuff because, like you said, I've got to just watch the tape and put the information that's out there on the tape because I know everyone's going to be reading it. And what do you say? I got to say strengths and weaknesses. I mean, I can put something about character concern and maybe my grade, maybe it could be altered a little bit, but typically
Mhm.
I don't. Like, whatever I see on tape is what I see on tape. And you're right. TV, mainstream big TV shows, it's a lot of Shador Sanders talk, but the reality is Shador Sanders is probably not one of the, I don't know if any of the quarterbacks are a top 10 player in this draft. But
Nah,
the guys we're talking about are guys who are top 10 talents in this draft, though, and they're not talked about much.
and that's the thing that is irritating. The other thing that has been irritating about the process, and this isn't supposed to be like a thing where we're airing out grievances, but let's be real. Like we've talked about Cam Ward, and the way that we've talked about him, the way we've put him up there, he's going to go number one. But I think everyone should understand Cam Ward is not the best player in this draft. Like whether you talk about Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, or whatever, Ashton Jinty, whatever, but like there are multiple guys that are better players, better prospects than Cam Ward. He may be the first quarterback to go, and we're going to celebrate him and give him his flowers as that. But when we're grading the player for the player, there are other players that are at the front of the line when it comes to Cam Ward. And
Yeah.
let's also talk about this because of the Shadur Sanders thing or whatever. And even though I had him ranked, like him and Cam Ward, to me, I get the same grade. I just have a preference for Shadur over Cam Ward. But let me be honest about my grade when it comes to Shadur and Cam. Both of them I gave bottom of the first round grades. And the reason why bottom of the first round, because it's hard to talk about like on TV life, bottom of the first round, that means you don't like them. No, it means what I'm saying is solid starter. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that I believe that he is going to be an all pro superstar, Hall of Famer, or whatever. It's a solid starter grade. And your conversation with Ballard or Ryan Poles or anybody in the league would tell you, look, man, your grade is to reflect how you expect him to play. And if we're being true to the process, look, if you told me that Shadur Sanders was drafted 26 by the Rams, I was like, that's actually perfect because that's where he would be graded at in most years. He's graded bottom of the first round. The Rams are picking there. Here we go. If he goes 21 to the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's perfect because I would say the grade reflects where he goes. Where teams mess up when they draft people much higher than the value or the talent that the player brings out. And I know on
Yeah.
TV, we mess up and we cloud the minds of fans by saying, oh, people get pushed up. No, they shouldn't get pushed up. If a player is not a blue chip player, you cannot take him in a blue chip position because it throws off everything when you get down the line and you start talking about expectations and those things. If you take an average player in a blue chip spot in 3 years, you're like, man, we took him third overall. He's not giving us because he never was that player.
Never was that. Yeah. I took a lot of bullets in my starting around in the second mock. I mean, I've watched all these guys and I'm like, man, NFL team, I'm just going to go with what I see because I trust what I see. And I put Shador, once I had him falling in the
Mhm,
mock past a couple spots. And at that time, Raiders were a potential and
mhm,
Jets. But the second mock is before free agency. And
mhm,
so I was like, man, if these teams tighten it up with free agent quarterbacks, he's going to fall because
mhm,
the tape doesn't say you draft him this high. And so I had him
mhm,
sliding down. I had the Browns jump up and grab him at 29. Ooh, ooh.
mhm,
The internet was not happy with me for doing that. But I just had to be real because that happens a lot. Sometimes guys get drafted earlier. The next one, I put him at 24. This last one, I'm probably putting him at 21 with the Steelers.
mhm,
And I think it's because, you have to find you're right. There's a long history of passing. Like, can you imagine passing on Abdul Carter, And someone are going to argue the Titans are doing this. You could make this argument. You're passing on Abdul Carter, you're passing on Travis Hunter
Yeah.
for Cam Moore, or Shador or any other Jackson Dart, any other
Mhm.
quarterback. And I think with the NFL, Brian Billick, I've said this story before. He's made the comment before when I was in the room and
Mhm.
he was talking. He said, as soon as you draft a first round quarterback, the hourglass is turned over on your job. And if you don't develop that quarterback, you and your general manager get fired. Usually the head coach for sure will get fired, sometimes the GM. And he said,
Mhm.
Kyle Bowler got him. Nothing against Kyle Bowler, but he said we drafted Kyle in the first. And his whole point was, if you're comfortable taking a player with the 19th pick, you should be comfortable taking a quarterback. That
Mhm.
is, you should be comfortable taking him with the 5th pick, because either way, you're going to get fired if you don't develop them. And I thought that was interesting. However, I would also say, now wait a minute, who are the guys we're passing on in the draft if we were to take a guy number
Mhm.
5? So I just think that this draft, very, very rarely have I had quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence would be the one time, and he's been, I think, kind of average so far. Very rarely have I had quarterbacks as the very best player in the draft, to be honest with
And
you.
it
Miles
is
Garrett, Saquon Barkley, but it's rare to have quarterbacks who are actually on film the best players.
it is rare, and we talk about the value of the position, and that is the other thing when it comes to it, Lance. We talk about first round quarterbacks versus not. We did all the research, and what was crazy to me, like since 2015, over the last decade, we talk about Pro Bowlers. 19 Pro Bowl quarterbacks were first round picks from 2015 to whatever. 19 Pro Bowlers are taken in the first round. In rounds 2 through 7, 4. Quarterbacks picked 2 through 7 have only made 4 Pro Bowls. Second round pick was Jalen Milroe. 7th round, I think, was Brock Purdy. Garner Minshew.
No, not Jalen Milroe, Jalen Hurts. Yeah.
Jalen Hurts, sorry.
Yeah.
Garner Minshew was a Pro Bowler. He counts in that. Brock Purdy would count in that. But that's what we're talking about. So when we start to have these conversations, and we always get to it, right? Like on TV, we talk about like, hey, man, who's the second round guy that you can get? Nobody. Like, because the odds suggest that it's not going to happen. If they're not graded as a first round talent, the odds suggest that they're not going to be a player that really makes a dent in the league. And this year reminds me of the Kenny Pickett year, where we talked about these guys, Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, and whoever else was in that class. Oh, man, somebody's going. No.
Matt Corral.
No, yeah.
Matt Corral was the other one.
And so I say this to you to remind me, hey, man, grade the player for the player and live with the grade. It is unlikely that if there's someone that doesn't pop for us when we're looking at quarterback, it's unlikely they're going to pop in the league like that.
So, Bucky, I done this, a 10-year study, and you're talking a lot about kind of a lot of the stuff that I did. So here's the number, Buck. You either think they're a starter, and if they're a starter, you're willing to risk your job, you put them in a first. That's what it is.
That's what it
Over
is.
the last 10 drafts, 35 first-round quarterbacks, 14 third-rounders, 6 second-rounders. And the second-rounders, as you mentioned, Jalen Hurts, but you got Christian Hackenberg, Kyle Trask in the second round, Will Levis. Like it's a dead zone. Now, there was a time in the 14 draft, I think it was, where you had Jimmy Garoppolo, you had Derek Carr. That was a
Had some
little different
success.
time.
Yeah.
But now when you look at it, it's really teams are saying, look, if we think a quarterback is a first, and this is why Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, Shador Sanders, this could swing either way for them. But what you rarely see as many second round picks. Only 6 players in the last 10 drafts have been picked in the second round as a quarterback. And the reason's simple. If we think you're a quarterback, we're pushing you into the first. We're going to get the extra year on you because it's too expensive at quarterback, especially now. We're going to get the extra year. We'll get the franchise year. We got the developmental time. And if we don't think you're if we don't think you're a starting quarterback, why are we going to take you in the second when there are much better cornerbacks? This is a picked over. Your position group's already picked over. I got real cornerbacks. I got real linebackers who are going to start this year and his history tells us could make Pro Bowls. Why am I going to? You're going to go to the third round. So it's almost like you're either in the first or you're in the third historically. This year could break the mold because I think Milroe goes in the second. I think Tyler Shuck probably goes in the second. I
Yeah,
think
there's a
there
lot
could.
of conversation. There's a lot of conversation. Like I saw Bruce Feldman talked about, don't expect to see Tyler Shuck go in the top 40. You had Tom Pelissero put a report out saying NFL coaches and scouts have told him they believe Jalen Milroe is a better running quarterback than Lamar Jackson was in college, which I was like, hold on. Like, you probably want to check the facts.
Woo, we
Lamar
forgot.
Lamar Jackson had 4,000 rushing yards in 3 years. He had back-to-back rushing seasons with 1,500 yards. He scored 50 rushing touchdowns. I love Jalen Milroe. I love his superpowers. Jalen Milroe ain't get close to doing what Lamar Jackson did as a collegiate player.
No.
Like, so it's unfair to even make that comparison.
Yeah, it's not even, doesn't make sense because you're telling me running quarterback, well, you have to be able to throw some. And Jalen, frankly, cannot throw like Lamar Jackson did in college. Jalen's decision making, his accuracy, it's not good passing tape. Honestly, Jalen Milroe's tape is not very good this year as a passer. That's why some of the late buzz on him. I mean, he's an incredible athlete. Don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of the Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. He's not Jalen Hurts either. Jalen was a better thrower of the football coming out. Jalen was just a little tardy from a timing standpoint, but he can spin it. He's got an arm. He's got a really tight spiral. He's got rare leadership stuff to him. He's got, Jalen Hurts is a guy that I really learned from because I just didn't think that guy could be a full-time starting quarterback and be a good one. But when you have, and I do think the Eagles have done a nice job of putting him in position to succeed. Like they're asking him to do things he does well, which is the key for all quarterbacks, really, when you get right down to it. Don't ask a quarterback to do something he doesn't do well, but maximize his strengths. And so if you draft Jalen Milroe knowing that, it's going to be somebody has to really have a plan for him. And, I do wonder, Bucky, in this day and age, people get a little sensitive. You and I know each other. So we can talk about whatever. Some quarterbacks, some teams are having a conversation. I've talked to teams who already are having a conversation about, hey, if it doesn't work at quarterback,
we put him in running back.
We're going to make the shift. We'll make the switch. Now,
so look, let's
a lot of those guys I don't know the last time that was successful where you came in starting as a quarterback.
Well, I would say that it reminds me a lot of our colleague, Michael Robinson, when Mike Robb was coming out of Penn State. Now, this is a long time ago, but Mike Robb made a transition that you never would think. You go from quarterback to being a slobber knocker at fullback. That is crazy, but that speaks to the type of athleticism that he had. But like, you can't tell me that Jalen Milroe couldn't be an offensive weapon if it didn't work out. He couldn't be someone that you line up in the dot and do that. He would have to learn how to do pass protection, whatever. But I mean, he's 4'3", he's 225 pounds, 4'3". You see the body is ripped up. Like, but you give him every opportunity to make it as a quarterback. I mean, no different than Taysom Hill. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's a much better player than Taysom Hill, but similarities. You try and find ways to put those athletes on the field. And sorry to lead the listeners on this dialogue and this dissertation on quarterback play, but it's funny how the conversation and how we spend so much of our time talking about it on TV that it prevents us from talking about some of the other guys. I'm glad you brought up Josh Simmons because that was a conversation that I wanted to have. But also, what's your take on Will Campbell? Because there's a lot of, like, he kind of bores people in terms of like, oh, the arm length and he's not this and not that. But I don't know. I saw him at LSU start right away, have a lot of success in what we all view as the toughest conference in football against a lot of big-time pass rushers. What's your take on him? What would your dad say about him?
Well, so my dad, as a former NFL O-line coach, he always said anyone who says arm length isn't important doesn't coach O-line because that's it is important because if you don't have it, you have to be you have a small margin for error when it comes to pass pro and really beyond pass pro, just run blocking, anything, because offensive line play is about first in, right? You want to be first in. Usually, typically that is with hands. And so if you are going to be a shorter arm tackle, and to be sure, shorter arm tackles are considered anything under 34 inches. Will Campbell's under 33 inches. That's like Jonah Williams when he came out. And I like Jonah Williams, but Jonah Williams has not been as big a factor as I was expecting him to be coming out. They tried to play him at tackle, and it's it's been pretty average over there. I think Will Campbell has really heavy hands. I think that right now there are some inconsistencies with his timing of his hands, so the length does come into play from time to time. I just think he gets sloppy with the footwork sometimes, and I do think that's correctable. But when the bullets are flying, all the work you did in practice, like you got to turn it into muscle memory. But what he's really special at is he has incredible recovery. Even when he gets beaten, he recovers and gets people blocked. And that is a skill. That's a talent. That's an athletic ability that you have to acknowledge. For being a guy that stands kind of straight up, and I asked his trainer, Duke Manyweather, about it. I said, what does he say about playing? He plays so high up. And he said, well, when he comes out of his stance, he kind of pops up anyway. So why not start there? So there's no delay. He starts there and then he takes off because he's actually a good run blocker, even though, he can bend. He just doesn't look like he's a bender. But when you see him play, you see the bending, you see the athleticism. I think he's a tough ass guy. I think he's somebody who will hit you in the mouth. I think he's a mentality player. And I think he's a patriot. You really want to know the truth. I think Mike Vrabel's going to say, man, that's a Patriot. I'm going to get Patriots in here, and we're going to start with this guy. We don't have a left tackle, and we need more Patriots. And I think it's that simple. I like Will Campbell. I think there's some holes in his game. I think there's some holes in Kelvin Banks' game. This is not a real clean tackle draft, to be honest with you, not at the top.
I'm glad you brought up Kelvin Banks because Kelvin Banks is a guy that I feel like people haven't talked enough about. He's kind of flown not under the radar on the process, but, man, this conversation about him being a top 10 pick that your buddy Ryan Poles could take a look at him maybe at 10 for the Bears if they just need another body, if they want to kind of continue to fortify that offensive line. He's interesting, but I want to go to another guy they talk about, Tyler Booker.
You got to quit putting Ryan Poles on me. I'm not like that with Ryan Poles anymore. He's a GM now. He's big time.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, like your former friend, the artist formerly known as.
Buck, I just write reports. I'm just trying to write reports. That's all I'm trying to
do. So Tyler Booker, like I think
he'd be a good. I think he could be a good Bear, though. I think he could be a good Bear. You're right, because they need a left tackle.
Oh, to my Kevin Banks.
Yeah, Kelvin Banks.
Yeah. Now, what do you think about Tyler Booker? Like people are making out like the one thing that I love and appreciate about him. He strikes me as the bodyguard. He's the bully on the block. He's going to do it. It may not always be pretty, whatever, but he is going to give you the attitude. He's going to move people. But there's some holes in his game. Like people would tell me that, hey, he's a gap scheme only player. You don't want to see his big lumbering self in a zone scheme. But what's your take? You're the O-line guru.
I went and watched him. So I watched him for the Joe Moore Awards too, which is top offensive line in college football. So I've spent a lot of time on a lot of these guys. I think you nailed it. Everything you said is accurate. It's exactly how I see it. And he's not, the best athlete. He didn't test very well from an athletic standpoint. But when I watch him on tape, and I went and watched, specifically search for lead pulls and outside zone blocks, because that's going to be on the move. I want to see him on the move. He's okay. He can get some lead pulls. Now you don't want him way out in space, but he can pull a little bit. He can come from the opposite guard spot and come around the corner for you if you need. It's a little better coming from play side guard to pull over the outside of the tackle. But I think what you said is important. He is a grimy, tough guy who you want to add. The teams who are most excited about adding him, they want somebody who is a bully in their building. They want a leader, and they want a guy that's going to take charge in the offensive line, and they want somebody who's going to get chippy if you mess with the quarterback. He's not the player that Quentin Nelson is in terms of the entire package, but he's got that same type of mentality that Q Nelson had coming out of Notre Dame, which is kind of a rare mentality. And Book has that. Now, I think there's some limitations in most drafts. I think he's a second-round pick. In this draft, my own hometown team, the Houston Texans, man, they need somebody in the locker room that can rally the troops and turn it into a bodyguard squad for the quarterback, CJ Stroud. And he strikes me as someone that D'Amico Ryans would love. D'Amico talks about swarm, and I can't remember what it stands for, but it's a mentality, it's a work ethic. And I think Booker, to me, he won't fall past 25. I couldn't see that mentality falling past a team that wants a mentality in their locker room. Now, he could go as early as 12 to Dallas to replace Zach Martin. But I think Donovan Jackson from Ohio State is more talented.
Yeah.
He's a better athlete. But Booker, people who like Booker are going to like him for everything you talked about at the beginning of what you said.
Yeah, the bully.
Yeah.
It's funny you talk
Yeah.
about Donovan Jackson because to me, he is really solid. He's really kind of clean when you look at him. Does a lot of
Mhm.
things really, really well. I can't say that he's exceptional in any area, but we've seen those guys play 10, 12 years, Lance, in the league. Like just solid Kevin Zeitler types that just play and
Yeah.
play and play and just have a lot of success. All right, Lance. So I want to clean up the offense. I want to ask you a couple of questions. Who is the wide receiver that we've slept on throughout this process in terms of a guy that we just haven't talked enough about? I feel like the conversation has been about really three guys. Ted McMillan has been on Matthew Golden, and then the conversation about of late Emeka Ibuka.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah, I
it.
was
We
told
haven't talked about
Igbuka
him.
is. Yeah, I think Igbuka goes in the first. I think Luther Burden is 100% that guy. Um, from the very outset, I couldn't get people on board with me on the Luther Burden train. This guy, so you have to go and specifically target his intermediate and deep throws. There's a lot in that offense, a lot of quick game built in. Let's just get the ball in his
Mhm.
hands, throw slants, throw wide receiver, screens, throw hitches. And when people talk about his productivity, I hear people say, hey, well, his productivity this year. Did you watch tape? Did you see his
Mhm.
quarterback?
Terrible.
You ain't going to be quarterback. Brady Cook had a good year, a pretty good year last year on tape. I thought he was like a fourth round type, third or fourth round type player. This year looks undraftable. And he's big. He's got a good arm. There's a lot of traits. He was really bad this year. So, how are you going to put production on Luther Burden when he's asked to catch a lot of short stuff and his quarterback just had a really rough year? Um, for me, he's got good play speed. He plays faster maybe than the time speed. When the ball's in the air, he is a terrific ball winner. He is really competitive. It reminded me of Garrett
Mhm.
Wilson when I watched him. I think Luther Burden, in my personal grades, is my top wide receiver in this draft. I've got him over
Mm.
McMillan, Golden, and Egbuka. I think people are sleeping on him way too much. And I don't know if there's something else at play here, but Luther Burden, if he gets to I don't even think he needs the right spot. I think Luther's just going to show out as a pro. He's going to get out of that Missouri offense and where he had some limitations. And I think you're going to see a different wide receiver. I think people need to remember what they thought of him before the year started.
It's funny, man, because when I look at him, I just love everything about his game. He's a catch and run specialist. He's tough. He's physical. I made the comparison to Debo Samuel just in terms of like what he does with the ball in his hands,
Yes.
and he's underrated in that regard. Let's talk about some other guys beneath it. You got the Iowa State guys, the Jays, as I call them. You got the big guy, I think is with Higgins, and then you have
Yeah.
Noel, who's the shorter, quicker, move around guy. You also have some other guys. Like I just feel like we haven't emptied the clip in terms of like wide receivers that can play, guys that we like, other guys,
Yeah.
because it seems like there's so many guys. Jaden
I'll give you.
Royals from Utah State is one.
Yeah, you weren't at Senior Bowl, were you,
No,
Buck?
I wasn't a senior. I was at East West.
Okay. So Jalen Royals look like I love Jalen Royals. My grade on him is I got a second round grade on him. I think he goes in the third, is my guess. But some people think fourth. I'm just telling you, he's got great size. He's physical from the slot. He catches everything, great hands. I think he's one of the safest wide receivers in this draft. You're not going to line him up outside and stretch the field, but he could end up being a high volume target. He deserves more conversation than he gets. I think Trey Harris, you know, I came into last year. I watched Trey Harris last year. I thought he was coming out, and I was like, no, fourth, fifth. I watched him this year, and I thought he was a second. I think he goes in the third. He didn't run as fast. He's in the low 4.5s, but man, on tape, he can win deep. And then when you throw him the ball underneath, so they do a lot of, and Ole Miss kind of simplifies sometimes. So you got a lot of vertical. It's kind of that you're on that linear plane. So you got verticals, and then you got stop routes, and then you got hitch routes, and they don't ask him to do a lot of sink and break and run more complicated routes. You want to give him the ball on a 3-yard hitch, he is going to be a bull in a china shop after the catch. Like, he is a really physical runner after the catch. He does have that ability to get down the field and create explosive plays. I don't care that he doesn't run a 5. I don't care that he doesn't run a 4.4 because unless you have safety help, it's going to be him versus the other guy, and he's a bully when the ball is in the air. So I think Trey Harris should have
Mm.
a little bit more conversation. I think he's going to be a good wide receiver number 2 in the league. And then another guy who, battled some injury last year and came back, or was it this year that he got injured? It was this year. Torrey Horton from Colorado State. He's a good football player. Torrey is a good football player. And once again, we get so caught up in talking to the same names over and over, but Torrey Horton is a good football player who I think could end up going in the third round and becoming a quick contributor in the NFL.
Mm. Okay, so back to the Harris conversation. It's funny because there was one conversation about Trey Harris before the combine, and then it was like he went to the ether. Like he just disappeared because he didn't run a 4.4 time, even though on tape we see him run by guys time and time again in that Ole Miss offense. And it's one of the dangers of being so caught up in the combine and the numbers is that guys that we liked before on tape, we kind of pushed them to the side in lieu of guys who were the super athletes at the combine. Look, man, Harris was a guy that was a big play specialist. Like, think about a number of deep balls we saw Jackson Dart throw to him. And all of them were not schemed up, hey, he's wide open because Lane Kiffin was a master of the pen. He ran by some legitimate guys. And one of the things that I learned from Mike Holmgren and Gil Haskell, they said, like, when you have a big guy that is over 6'2", who runs 4.5 to 4.55, that's moving for a bigger guy. And that you want to give them credit for being able to do that. So it's just funny how forgotten he has become in this process. When we talked about him, like leading up to the combine, we talked about him potentially being a bottom of the first round guy. That's what the conversation was.
Yeah, and his 10-yard split is a 1.56, which is pretty good. It shows you how quick he can accelerate. Vertical leap of 38.5 and a broad of 10.5. So he's got some explosives.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't really get it personally on him. I do wonder sometime if there's a natural tendency even in the league. He started off at La Tech, and then he came and had 2 years at Ole Miss, started off at La Tech. I do wonder sometime if there is a little bit of a subconscious bias against guys who start at smaller programs and then portal to larger ones. And maybe that will go away now that the portal's a mainstream thing.
I wonder, yeah, like there may be something to it because even the Matthew Golden conversation, there's that conversation. I mean, there's that stigma a little bit. It goes from H-Town to then being at UT, like, and then at UT, you're trying to figure out, well, if he's so good, why wasn't he featured? And then people say, well, because you paid Isaiah Bond the money, so you had to feature him. Maybe, but coaches are coaches. They see everything every day. They didn't feature him like a number one all the time, but it showed up on occasion. Anybody else on offense? Oh, running back. I got to go to this running back thing because, hey, man, there's some love on the street for Dylan Sampson from Tennessee.
Good. I was hoping you were going to say Dylan Sampson. You can't watch – Bucky had 22 rushing touchdowns in the SEC, 22 rushing touchdowns. And he gets tough yards. He gets 15-yard running touchdowns. He has really, really impressive instincts in short yardage. Like, he's only 200 pounds in that neighborhood, but when he gets the ball in tight quarters, he's got that Emmitt Smith quality. You know how Emmitt could find just the smallest crease and work his way through. I think he has some of that. I think when it's all said and done, he is one of the – Dylan Sampson for me is my – let's see. I got it Ashton Genty, then Omarion Hampton, and then and then I got Dylan Sampson, 3. Ahead of Quinshon Judkins, ahead of Caleb Johnson, who I think is – I didn't love him on tape as much as maybe some other people did. And no, I think Dylan Sampson is a good running back. If he were 210 pounds, no one blinks and he goes in the second and no one says a word. He's about 200 pounds, and now all of a sudden, we got question marks about him. I don't have any questions about him.
It's funny because in my last top 5, I put Cam Scatterboo over top of him. And some of it,
legit.
Yeah, but some of it is like Lance, like sometimes you just want to give guys visibility. And so I given Dylan Sampson some visibility, but I really loved Cam Scatterboo. And at the same time, I really like what Dylan Sampson brings to the table. When I watched him at Tennessee, man, speed, quickness, balance, burst, all that stuff, he puts it in. And the fact that you talked about, man, you just don't score 20-plus touchdowns in the SEC. Like, you put the ball in the paint, people can talk about that offense and how they spread it out or whatever, but I saw him carve up some big time defenses like scooting and scoring around the corner.
Yeah. I got in an argument with a personnel director about him, and they were trying to send me videos of him with big lanes to run through. I'm like, yeah, we can all do that. I can show you Caleb Johnson if you want. Like, we can all go to a play and screenshot it. This isn't hard. But I watched that Joker on every carry, and he is really like he's a talented, instinctive runner. I think the same thing with, in Cam Scatabo, it's really interesting talking to teams who are there's internal fights in buildings right now about him because you have one section which will fight for him, and then you'll have other scouts or coaches or whatever. Typically coaches are on his side, to be honest with you. That's kind of what I'm finding. And it's because they don't like, there is no preconceived notion. He's a guy that looks like, a mini version of Mike Allstott or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
All I know is when you watch him play, he's really hard to tackle.
Mm-hmm.
He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He scores a lot of touchdowns. He's rarely stopped on first impact. Rarely. He creates for himself with tremendous power. And the burst is average. The speed is going to be below average in terms of top end speed. But when you're the way I see him, Bucky, is I want to have a number one back, a good number one, and then Scatabo is my closer.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to come in and we're going to beat the hell out of you with these two guys. And like, can you imagine if Jim, Harbaugh got his hands on him? I mean, he's going to want to, we're just going to play bully ball. He's going to get a couple and all he's going to want to do is get downhill and break people off. So, for me, Scatabo is that perfect second back for a team that wants to play power running downhill.
Let's flip quickly to defense. We talked about the defensive tackles and those guys. Anybody else that we need to touch on who we haven't kind of put enough light on? I've talked about Derek Harmon before, coming from Michigan State and those guys, but someone who we haven't talked about is TJ Sanders. Did you like him from South Carolina?
I did. And it's interesting. I thought he was a little small on tape. And then I saw him at the combine. And he's not the biggest guy, but he's built really well. Sometimes you just got to get eyeballs on somebody. It's hard to tell on tape. You get eyeballs and you see guys who have the body type and who don't. And he's got the body type. Like I said, he's not the biggest guy, but he's got a real NFL body type. And I think he needs to be talked about. I think Shamar Turner out of Texas A&M. Some questions about the medicals on him. He had a leg injury, so he hasn't been available for this process. His agent says he's been medically cleared. You got to check in with teams to find out if they have him on the board or not. Shamar Turner, Justin Madubuike, that's the kind of player Shamar Turner is. An undersized interior lineman who is really explosive and really, really fierce. He doesn't give you any quarter at all. Every snap is you're in a fist fight. And his problem is, Buck, he has like 5 15-yard penalties. He can't stop himself. He's like a hockey goon. If you mess with one of his teammates, he's running over and cleaning you up. And it's not even like, can't you do it inside a play where they can't catch you? Like, you can't do it after the tackle and they're resetting the football. Like, it's late. But he has a joy for football. Talking to people at A&M, they love him. I mean, they absolutely love him. And I thought the 15-yard penalties, I wanted to find out, is this a guy that, has anger issues? Is he out of control? Is he an issue in practice? In the locker room? Not at all. They love Shamar Turner, and they said he just goes to war for his teammates. He just has to reel it in a little bit. But Shamar Turner is somebody who you need to talk about. Shamar Turner, and as I mentioned, the other defensive tackle was, as you said, TJ Sanders. Those are two guys who can make plays on the interior. They're not just drain cloggers. Like, they're guys who make plays. And Jamari Caldwell from Oregon is another one of those guys. Kind of a sloppy body type, and you think, But then when you put the tape on, him and Vernon Broughton have these weird body types. Vernon Broughton from Texas. I think both of them get drafted in the 4th. These jokers just make a ton of plays. They're all over the place. But, I know enough to know that NFL teams like guys that look a certain way and have certain traits.
Yeah.
But then once you get past the 3rd round, it's like, let's go get the best football. We don't care. Who are the best guys? Who are the best, most talented football players we can get? And I think that's when Jamari Caldwell and Vernon Broughton, 2 defensive tackles in this draft, are going to pop up. I like both of those guys. They make a lot of plays.
Let's go linebacker situation. Everyone is we talked ad nauseum about Jalen Walker, Jahai Campbell. There's love for Schlesinger, the kid from UCLA.
Carson Schlesinger,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's love for him. But Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma is someone that kind of caught my eye. I love the playmaking. He ran faster than people anticipated at the combine. When you looked at him and wrote his profile, anything stand to you about him? What about him and Barrett Carter? Because I feel like Barrett Carter is just, boy, he got rocks in his pants, and they have just dropped him to the bottom of the ocean when it comes to the draft.
Yeah, so Barrett Carter, I had a second round grade on him last year when I wrote him up. Not a lot's changed. I mean, I think he's going to go into fourth probably. I think the one thing is I thought he was a 4.4, low 4.5, 4.4 40 guy. And he came out at his pro day. I'm going to pull it up for you right now. And this is what I think it really hurt him is he was supposed to be one of the things that stood out with him was going to be his speed, and then he ran a hold on a second, let me pull it up right here. He ran a 4.63. That's not slow. It's fine. His 10-yard split was 1.59. But when you think a guy's going to run a 4.52 and then he has a 33-inch vertical jump, which is not the most explosive vertical jump, he weighed in at 232. I think that's one of the things that hurts a little bit. I know on tape, I like him on tape. I mean, the testing and that's all part of it. But on tape, I think he's a pretty good player. I like Barrett Carter. I think he's worthy of going on day 2 from the tape. I think because of his testing, he probably goes on day 3. Schlesinger has some of the best instincts I've seen on tape the last several years. I mean, it's like he's moving with the play. It's like he knows where the play is. And he's not the biggest, strongest guy, but because he's ahead of the blocking scheme, he doesn't get touched up the way some linebackers do. He's able to slip blocks because he's running the play for you and he's running the track for the running back. So he's a one year starter with like 1 billion tackles. And I guess the word, and I'm sure you heard this, was I heard from somebody who knew people inside the UCLA program that said he was just wrecking Chip Kelly's offense when he was on scout team defense. And for some reason, all the players thought he should be, he should be a starter. And he didn't start until his last year. And then he was a killer this year. Now, he's been a special teams ace the entire time he was there. He's a former walk-on, but he's got good speed. He's an explosive. I think he's got like a 40-inch vertical. He's got explosiveness to him. The one guy, it's considered a down year for linebackers. The one guy that Danny Stutzman is a good player. He ran well. Danny Stutzman's going to be a starting linebacker in the league. I think he goes in the 3rd round. Another guy that deserves more attention is Demetrius Knight from South Carolina. Kind of a throwback in terms of body type, about 248 pounds. He's big. He's physical. He can run a little bit. He runs pretty well for being his size. They say he is a phenomenal leader in the locker room and on the field, a phenomenal leader. Very upbeat, a guy who brings good, positive, high energy to the field and to the locker room, but he also is going to split your wig for you if you try to get downhill on him. So, he's got that physicality between the tackles and he's got the demeanor that you want setting the tone on defense. But once you get past Stutzman, Knight, Schlesinger, Campbell, Walker, you start running into some ifs and buts, I think, from there. And you better have good special teams play. Even though I like Barrett Carter too, I gave him a 62, which is a 3rd. But I don't think he goes in there. But Jeffrey Bassa from Oregon, I think he'll be a solid player. Smell Munden has had some foot injury issues. I think he'll be a solid player. But it gets a little trickier after that. So if you want linebackers, you probably need to get them inside the first 90 picks.
Last position group to cover, just be the DBs. We'll lump them all together. We've talked about all the usual suspects at corner. Everyone has, we talked ad nauseum about Jadab Aaron. We talked about Will Johnson. We got the injured guys, Siobhan Ravel and those guys, Benjamin Morrison. Maxwell Harrison has gotten love, caught fire of late. Let's move beyond that. Who are the other guys? The other guys that we need to talk about that may not be first-round guys, but when we get into that run in the 2nd and 3rd, when we're going to be on the live show, like who are names that we need to talk about, we need to at least flush out?
Jacob Parrish, Kansas State cornerback. Tremendous short area quickness. Very, very sticky. There's sometimes he reminds me of Jair Alexander when he was coming out. He is a really sticky corner with sticky feet. and is a natural free-flowing athlete. He's got that basketball athleticism. I like Jacob Parrish a lot, and I think he ran like really, really well, if I remember correctly too. So I keep getting third on him, but I'm telling you, I think he's definitely going to outplay that. From a trait standpoint, he weighed in at the combine. I'll give you his combine numbers here in a second. But Jacob Parrish is a guy that I'm going to get hyped on when we are on the broadcast. He ran a 4.35. He's got 37 and a half inch vertical, a 10.9 broad. He is 5'10", 191. I mean, the problem we have right now, Bucky, that you've probably seen too, is it used to be, oh, good, we'll just throw him in a slot. Well, a lot of teams now want bigger.
Mm-hmm.
They want those hybrids now in the slot. So if this guy were 5'11 and a half, 6 foot, we may be talking about him in the first round. But it's strange because it's not like he's 175 pounds. He's 190, 191 running in the 4.3s, and he's 5'10. That's kind of average size. But there are some teams that say we just don't, unless you're an absolute dog, we're not going to play you at slot because it's too valuable for us to have, a run defender in the slot. So I don't know where he goes. I think he's a really, really good cornerback. He's somebody that I think is going to be a good NFL player. I also think Jonas Sanker, the safety out of Virginia, he is a heat-seeking missile downhill. He's got real NFL size, 6 foot, about 216 pounds, runs pretty well, can run and hit you. He's got some instincts underneath, but he's one of those guys that as soon as the play gets started, how there's some guys that are defensive players and there's others who are running into the fire. They say like firefighters, you got to have a different mentality. When that cage door locks in the UFC, right? You got to have a different mentality. Jonas Sanker is one of those guys that where's the fire? And he's flying in there trying to go hit and be hit. So I like that. And it's funny because I'm finding the teams like him too. He doesn't get a lot of talk from the general public, but I think he's one of those guys that every team secretly hopes, yeah, that's our guy in the third round. That's our guy in the third round. Well, we'll see which one of y'all win the race.
Yeah, it'll be so interesting to see what that looks like, how that looks in terms of the guys who like those type players, who want to put those players in the back end. It's great that you brought up the different, the shift that we're seeing in the slot players because so many colleges are playing with the quote unquote star position, that hybrid nickel. You have a lot of different options that if you want as a slot defender, do you want a safety type? Do you want a corner type? And those things. The other thing that's shifting, Kyler Gordon getting paid from the Chicago Bears, moving that up into the $20 million category, the nickel position. Lance, now we're really looking for guys that have a specific skill set for the slot. The nickel used to be the throwaway. Hey, anybody that's little, we're going to make them a nickel. Anybody that's 5'8", 5'9", we're just going to put them and make them a nickel corner. We'll put them on the board and kind of that's where they go. Now it's a legitimate position, and it's interesting because you have to grade 12 positions on defense for starters, and the nickel position is one of those.
Yeah, it's why Jahdae Barron, some people are going to look at Jahdae Barron from Texas and they're going to say, well, where do we put him? Like, we can't define his value. I talked to another defensive coach who told me, oh, I love it. He's Brian Branch all over again. I got a nickel who can play out in the slot if I want. And so when you look at a guy like Jahdae Barron, he's got the versatility to play over a pass catching tight end in the slot. He can play true slot. He can play the overhang nickel, that star where he can get after it as a run defender, and he can step outside and play outside. So I think it's his versatility that may have him as a first. Almost Travis Hunter, I almost don't count him. He's like when Tiger Woods used to talk about, well, who's going to finish second? Well, Travis is going to be the best. He's my first receiver in the draft. He's my first cornerback in the draft. So who's after him? I think Barron goes first because ahead of the other corners because he tested well. He had a great year this year, a lot of ball production, but versatility, you just referenced it. Man, the ability to play in that nickel role and outside, to play inside and outside comfortably and successfully, that's kind of rare. So I think that it has made grading these guys a lot more difficult. Brian Branch really showed you just go get a good football player, and a defensive coordinator is going to figure out how to play him. He'll figure out how to play the safety. He'll figure out how to play the corner. But, it is tricky. They played Malachi Starks there this year. Georgia did. But he got beat on a lot of routes. Not bad. He just wasn't like He's playing cover nickel basically. So when I'm watching him in coverage stuff, he's going up against some pretty good SEC wide receivers. Then when I dial the tape back to 2023 and he's playing more of a split safety role, he's a lot better. I mean, he's coming downhill, making plays, and so it really makes it more challenging to look at those players. But at the same time, for some NFL coaches, they see, oh man, we love it. We love it because now we can be varied in our defensive approaches and our personnel groupings. And you can't really out scheme us. I mean, isn't that really what it gets down to, Bucky, right now is we don't want you to be able to mismatch us. We want to mismatch you up front, but which happens a lot with D-line and O-line. We don't want you to mismatch us on the perimeter with skill.
Yeah, it's such a compelling thing. Lance, man, we made it. We stretched it out an hour. We stretched it out an hour talking about all this stuff. And look,
that's my bad. That's my bad.
No, it's on me. Let me finish it because that was a winning combination brought to you by Lowe's. We help, you save. But now, like we stretched out, and there's so many things to talk about. I think we have another podcast before we go to the draft. I don't know, maybe Wednesday or something. We'll come back and kind of talk about that. I know we got the post stuff. I got you on one of the days, and then we'll pull some other guys in.
We got the mock. We got Bucky Brooks's mock 4.0.
I guess something. I'm sitting here working on that right now as we go through it because I'm a little late to the party. But we're gonna get it. We're gonna get it done. But look, that's today's podcast. Move the Sticks. Me, Lance E. We'll be back later in the week to discuss all things the draft as we get ready for a huge event, maybe the biggest event on the scouting community's calendar. Until next time, I'm Bucky. That's Lance. We'll talk to you.